Hey guys, thanks for checking out this new video on the Checkout YouTube page. Today we are going to be talking about the JVC 1080p camcorder. This is a pretty entry-level camcorder that is a good indication of how different cinematic cameras are designed to work, how their menus are set up, how their batteries are charged, how everything's plugged in, all that great stuff. This is available to all students on the Checkout site at IT. It has the option of either a built-in viewfinder on the side, like most camcorders have, but you also have, for those opportunities where you're filming outdoors and it's really bright, you've got the traditional view piece that you can look through as well. Up on the front of the lens, you have your lens cap, which has a switch built in on the side. Doesn't do it automatically, so keep that in mind. It's got built-in N.D filter for when you're shooting outside and you don't have one that you can slide onto the front of the lens. Over here, you have a switch between zoom and focus, which is what this ring on the front does. It doesn't do them all at the same time, so you do have to cross back and forth to get that how you want it. You've got white balance and ISO controls here on the side. The interesting thing about this JVC camera is that most of the controls are physical. You do have a few options on how you can control it with the onboard menu, which we will get to here in a little bit. But for the most part, very hands-on, very tactile, which if you like working with more physical gear, this is a great camera choice for you. It still has all of the same frame rate and resolution options that you have with most other high-quality camcorders, just with less to do with this screen, more on the front here. You have a built-in shotgun mic as well. We'll get to how to switch between different audio inputs if you want to use the second XLR input or the onboard stereo mic, anything like that. We'll get into this camera a little more here in a bit. Bottom line, before you even start fiddling with your settings, you want to be sure that you have a memory card inserted, which you have a little flip out here that will allow you to slide in your cards, and make sure your battery is fully charged. Your camera kit should come with a battery charger as well as an extra SD card. Make sure you get those put into the right spots before you start any shooting. All right, so this is the JVC camcorder. Everything I'm going to talk about applies to both the 1080p version and the 4K version. They're virtually the same camera, only difference is one can shoot 4K. So first thing you're going to want to do, over here on your right side, you have your on and off switch. It can switch between a few different modes. This camera can actually do both video and photo. For the purposes of this tutorial, we are going to be keeping on video mode though, so we're just going to switch up into standby or on mode. Flip it back so you can see. The camera will come on here in just a second. Now I already have the lens cap open. If you're doing this right, and the last person who used the camera set this up properly, hopefully by watching these videos, this should be closed, and it will give you a pop-up to tell you, hey, open up the lens cap. So go ahead and flip the switch to open that up. Already, we're looking a little overexposed. We'll get to that here in a little bit. First thing you're gonna wanna do, down here on the right side, you have a few different buttons for menu and display and changing some settings. We're going to skip the camera process menu first. We're going to go to our file format. Now, this is up to preference or up to whatever your professor wants for you shooting on this camera. If you want more image quality, but you're not worried about file size, stick with MOV. If you're worried about file size, you can jump down to MP4. Go to your system select. This has some preset image settings that you can tinker with a little more down the road. For the purposes of most of your filming on camera, you're going to be switching to 1080p at 24 frames per second. This camera cannot do 23.97, so keep that in mind when you're importing into a project file that you might have other cameras that shoot 24, but they might really be 23.97. Keep that in mind. So we're going to set that to 24. We're going to go back to menu. Now, if you don't want to keep hitting menu every time you're on a menu like this and you're switching, you can hit left on your little D-pad over here to go back to your original main menu. Recording code cannot be set right yet, that's okay. Most of your settings are going to bounce off between the physical controls on the camera as well as the settings on the digital menu. So on your media settings, that is where you will go to format everything that's on your card. In my case, I have an SD card in slot A, so I'm going to go ahead and format slot A. You can decide to format just the file, or you can format the numbering as well. In this case, I'm going to do a full reset and get rid of the numbering. So the next time you film a clip, it'll be right at the beginning of your numbers. Okay, go back to menu. We're really just going through more or less each menu, not fiddling too much with settings. It's more up to preference once you get to a point. Here's your win cut, depending on what mic you have, be it the stereo mic that's on board or a microphone that's plugged into your XLR inputs on the right side. This is where you can choose whether or not you want to have a win cut to get rid of any wind noise if you're not using a dead cat or a microphone or something like that. You can set your audio reference level. This will, when you have your mic set to auto mode over here, this will tell the camera and the microphone, okay, I want you to hover at around -20 dB as your average volume, or I want you to hover at -12. I personally tend to shoot for -12 because I like a bit more audio and not as much headroom, but it's totally up to you. Again, same with your mic level setting and your internal mic level. That just gives you a boost or a cut to your overall volume between your onboard or your condenser mic. When you have headphones plugged in, you can choose if you're going to get a mix of both microphones or all three, or if you're just going to get a stereo mix of everything lumped together. You can set your time code if you're trying to pick a preset. You can choose between different drop frames. If you're trying to match up with a world clock you might have on your set, this is a great place to get that synced up. All right, we're back here at our main screen. We're gonna hit menu again. This is where we can go back up to that camera process menu we talked about at the beginning. So this is where you can choose options that will assist you in filmmaking, whether that's telling you what's in focus, what's overexposed. This is a place to find those options. And all those options are going to reflect actions that'll pop up and appear on your LCD screen. So your focus assist, very self-explanatory. You can flip that on. It's in black and white now. The idea is if you have something that is in and out of focus, you will have red or green or blue lines, depending on which color you pick, that'll show you at what distance it becomes in focus on your camera. So we're gonna go back. I'm going to turn that off just to get some color back in our screen. Over here you have your zebra, which is a feature that pops up on a lot of cameras. It is meant to help you decide what is overexposed in your image. So instead of, you can see there's some zebraing going on this table. All this means is that at this level I have, this part of the table is slightly overexposed, which you can adjust by bringing down your aperture or lowering your ISO. Step below that, you can adjust how sharp that level is and how easy it is to see on your screen. If you're using an external monitor, you might not need to fiddle with that as much, but on this smaller LCD, it's very good to have. You can also decide whether or not you want to record your clips as one continuous file or to let the camera automatically break it up after a certain amount of time. Okay, so this is a setting where you can use either your component or your HDMI outputs on the camera to allow you to display it to a TV or an external monitor. Here you can adjust at what ratio your image pops out as. You can adjust color, you can adjust how your camera is output. All right, further down on the menu you have options to set your gain. You have different options for if you want a standard gain or something that's a bit less contrast for a more cinematic look. All right, so that's about it for the controls on the LCD screen itself. Again, this is a camcorder, it's built a little different, so there are a lot of tactile physical controls that are just as big as part of this camera as anything that's on the LCD. You have your iris switch here, so I'll toggle that. This little knob down here, which is normally meant for adjusting the volume on your headphones if you're tracking audio with your headphones. This will be used to open or close the aperture. Same with your shutter speed. If you're shooting at 24, you want to try to aim to have it at 1/48th of a second, but if you need to increase it or decrease it any amount, this is where you do that. And then you can also use the auto exposure switch if you don't want to worry about fiddling with these switches. But if you're doing this for a more professional film setup, this is where you would do that. Because this is a camcorder, you have a digital zoom as opposed to an analog zoom like you would on a typical lens. So those are just zoom in and out switches here on the right side. Down here below, again, we have our gain switches between low, medium, and high, which those values were set on the LCD screen. You have white balance. You can either switch to a preset, which will be chosen here on the LCD, or you can use the A and B switch to set your own white balance with a white balance card or a white sheet or anything you can use to set white balance if you want a very specific white balance on your set. This switch here will switch between focus and zoom, which is what this dial up here does. Again, it's a camcorder, so it doesn't have it separated like you would on a typical lens. You just have to switch between the two. You have an N.D filter available for the camera, which we talked about at the beginning. That's sunglasses for your camera, basically. So if it's a little too overexposed, but you don't want to close your aperture down so far, you can use the ND filter to cut off some of that light. Up here at the top, last thing we're going to talk about, these are audio controls. If you are going to be using the onboard preamps on the mic, this is where you'd switch between inputs 1 and 2. You have the option on camera to switch between the onboard stereo mic or to use either of these two microphone inputs. Over here, input 1 and 2, you're able to choose between a line level signal, a microphone level signal, or in the case of this mic being a condenser mic, you'd want to switch that down to the final setting of a microphone level plus 48 volts of phantom power. Over here on the right side, this would be where your input volume controls for your microphones are. You can either set it to be auto, which is what some of those settings in the audio menu on the LCD would control, or you can set a manual level, which is controlled by these dials over here. Go from 0 to 10, just set your level and get it right. All right, and that about does it for the JVC. Again, everything we've talked about is going to go for both the 1080 and the 4K models. There's really not much more else to say. Thanks so much for checking out this video. Check out all the others if you have any other questions, and film on.